going to make the Hunter's chicken with potato and sauce saussure. So we're going to start with the mise en place for the sauce first. The ingredients that we're going to need for that are we're going to do a shallot. We're going to keep these all separate in our little containers. So when we go to cook the sauce, we have everything separate because we're going to add it in batches. So we're going to start with our shallot. So we're going to take this whole shallot and we are going to mince it. So again, we're going to take and make a horizontal cut, about 1/8 of an inch, about 3/4 of the way through, just nice and easy. Then we're going to go vertically down 3/4 of the way. We're going to go all the way through the end of it, but we're not going to touch the very tip of that. Just like this. And we are going to just then brunoise this. We're going to do a bit of a fine brunoise on this. So just nice even cuts with our knife. At the very end, we didn't cut all the way through, so we're going to leave that. We're going to take everything and put it in our containers here. Get all of the shallots into this. Then any remaining piece we're going to go ahead and put in our compost. We're going to then take our sanitizer and wipe this off. Wipe off our cutting board again. Clean our knife off. And then the next thing we're going to do is our garlic cloves. So we're going to do about 2 garlic cloves or 1 larger one. So these are a little bit smaller, so we're going to do these. So similarly to what we did for the shallot, is we're going to do this to the garlic. So I'm going to actually use a smaller knife for this, just so it makes it a little easier. I'll use a little paring knife. So we're just going to cut about halfway on each of these. We're going to go ahead and cut these into smaller pieces. I'm going to go back to my bigger knife and just chop. Again, some fine brunoise. We're going to make sure the very end of it, the little heel of it, we don't use. Put that in. We're going to go ahead and just give a little bit more chop just to make it a little bit finer. Mince it. Take our deli container and fill our deli container with it. So it's about a teaspoon total. That's what we're looking for. And then from there, we are going to wipe my cutting board down, my towel. Then we're going to take our clean button mushrooms. So depending on the size, if they're nice and kind of medium size like this, we're going to slice them. Now if the mushrooms are very small, we don't want to slice them because they'll go into nothing. So those you could quarter, but these we want to slice. These are a good size mushroom. So we're going to take these. And if the stem is large like this, we're just going to take the stem off and put this into our compost bin where we just want the caps. Just like that. And the same container that we took them out of, we're going to put them back into. I'm just going to put it off to the side of my cutting board. So we're going to just simply slice these. So about 1/4 inch or so thick. We don't want to do smaller than that because they will shrink down. So we just want to do like we did with the small dice when you did the cucumber salad. We want to do the same here. 1/4 inch dice or 1/4 inch slice all the way down. And then we're going to put these to the side. In between each of these, because they're different items, we're going to wipe with sanitizer on our cutting board. We want to get rid of all of this. Make sure it's nice and clean. And then we went ahead and concassate our tomato exactly like we did for the sea cap salad. So scored the bottom, we cored the top, we put it in hot boiling water for about 30 to 45 seconds, just until the skin started to peel, and then we shocked it. So this has been cooling. So we're gonna take this out, and again, the skin should come right off. There shouldn't be really any resistance to it. Should peel right off. Nice and clean. So once you get that, we're gonna go ahead and cut this. We're gonna core it first, or quarter it. So we're gonna take the seeds out again, just like we did for our salad. Put the seeds in the compost bin. And then instead of slicing and dicing, we are going to more rough chop these. So we have our container here that they're going to go into. So I'm just gonna cut them in half and just some bigger pieces. So in the sauce itself, we wanna make sure that these kind of keep their integrity to some degree. So we wanna keep them bigger pieces. So when we do cook the sauce, they just don't disappear. So, but you wanna make them uniform, larger pieces. So making sure you're cutting them about the same size. So again, we're gonna go wipe our cutting board off. It's imperative that the entire process when we're doing anything, that we're keeping our cutting board clean and free from any sort of debris. And we also wanna make sure our cutting board doesn't have a lot of things on it. So I'm placing all of my mise en place items next to it, not on top of it. So from there, we are going to go on to our herbs. So we have two different herbs we're using this. We're using parsley and fresh tarragon. So parsley, we're using just curly parsley, just standard curly parsley. And we're going to do about 2 teaspoons of this. So we have our deli container again. So we're gonna kind of just take the bunches. We're looking for more of the leaf and less of the stem. We're gonna group this together. We're gonna do that chiffonade again. So just really light chop, keep it very tight. So the less we can do to this, the more flavor that we're gonna save. And it's gonna keep that really nice green color. The more we chop this, the more that color is gonna start going away. We're bruising it. So just really, really, really delicate. So we're gonna go ahead and put this into our container. If there's any larger stems, we can take that out. I'm going to put that to the side. I'm going to then wipe my cutting board again. We're never wiping anything onto the ground. We're never wiping anything directly into the trash can. We're going to take that, and if there's any excess, I'm going to put it in my hand, and that will go into the compost bin. And then I'm going to quickly sanitize again, making sure I'm getting anything gone, cleaning my knife. And then we're going to move on to the tarragon. So the tarragon naturally grows like a blade of grass. So it's on a stalk already. So the easiest way to get these off is you just go against kind of the grain and they just pull right off, just like that. So that's really what we want to get. We don't want this really woody stem. So we just want the leaves, and at the end you can just pick off. So this, we're going to discard that, and we're just going to keep these leaves. So what we're going to do is kind of line up the leaves as much as possible. Discard any sort of bits that are not perfect. And just like the other herb, we're going to just very lightly chiffonade this, just cut it into very small uniform pieces. You're going to start to smell that beautiful tarragon. And we want to keep that intact as much as possible. So again, we're going to take this, put this into our cup. You don't really want to cut it more than that, so it's just nice and beautiful. And go ahead and put this over with the rest of our ingredients. And again, we're going to wipe off between every single time. Remember, we're wiping into our hands, not onto the floor. Okay, the last thing we're going to do for our sauce in preparation cooking is we're going to take our stick of butter. We want to make sure this is cold butter. It needs to remain cold. So our recipe calls for 1 to 2 tablespoons. If you have the little stick, it'll tell you how many tablespoons, right? So we're going to go to 1 to 2 tablespoons. We're going to cut that. We're going to go ahead and cut that in half, half again, and quarter it. So we're just getting little cubes of butter that we're going to go ahead and put into our little deli container and set that aside. The rest, we're going to put that in the trash. Put that back on our thing. So now we're going to do our olive oil mashed potatoes. So we're going to start with a simple russet potato. We're going to make sure this is cleaned well. So make sure this is nice and clean before I use it. We're going to then start peeling it. Go all the way around. Simple wide peeler is probably the easiest. Oh, it gets a little slippy. All right, and once we get to the end, just make sure all of that comes up. You want to get any sort of peel off of it. Just like that. And from there, we're going to take all of our peel. We're going to put it in our compost bin. Side. It's going to wipe it really quick because we're going to cut it. All right. So we're going to cut this into large dice. That way it's a little bit more uniform when we do go to cook it. It'll cook a little more evenly and faster. We also want to make sure we have cold water in our pan. We don't want to cook it in hot water to start. We want to cook it in cold water. The reason we do that is to make sure that it's cooked evenly. If we were to cook it in hot water, the outside will cook a lot faster than the inside, and it'll get a little bit more mushy, and also the starches will come out and it'll get gummy once you start making it. So always cook mashed potatoes in cold water. So we're going to cut these in just about quarters. So these are going to be less important that we get the perfect dice. It's more of just getting a uniform cut. So each quarter we're going to go in another quarter. I'm going to go ahead and just get them cut up. So much bigger pieces, but it's going to cook a bit faster. So then we will go ahead and put them in our pot. We want to make sure that there's a good amount of water to potato. So we want to have enough water to cover it and then some, because it is going to cook out. We also want to make sure that we season this heavily. So we want to heavily season this. Make sure that it's enough that it almost tastes like seawater, because potatoes will absorb that, and you want to have a little bit extra in there. So we're going to take this and cook it. So we're going to cook this to bring this to a boil. We're going to then turn it down so it's a little bit heavier simmer. We're going to cook this for about 10 to 15 minutes. It's not going to take very long because how they're cooked or how big they are. Right now we're going to go ahead and prepare our chicken. So I have our chicken breast, airline chicken breast, in a bag that's sitting on ice so it stays cold. So we're going to take this out. So what we want to do next is we want to make sure that this is completely Frenched. So that means that we're going to take all of this off so we just see this little wing bone completely kind of naked, if you will. So I'm going to take my paring knife and I'm going to score in a circle all the way around, just kind of where that joint meets, all the way through till I hit bone, in a circle all the way around. I'm going to then go through and make sure all of that is exposed. The bone is completely exposed. You're going to have remnants of the meat sitting on there still because it's going to naturally want to stick to it. So you're going to push it. It should come pretty cleanly right off. I'm going to put that back in our chicken bone bag here. So to get any sort of residual meat that's stuck on there, I'm going to take the back of the knife, not the sharp, but the back, and I'm going to go down and just push everything down. Anything that's not just fresh bone, down and clean it so it's completely clean. Okay, so you're going to have it just like that. All right, so from there, I'm actually going to change my gloves really quickly. Remember, working with any raw chicken, you want to make sure anything around isn't going to be cross-contaminated. So keep it very clean. We're going to use this cutting board only for this chicken. We're going to discard and clean after. So we want to make sure everything is completely clean. So we're going to take, and we want to dry this chicken as much as possible. So when we sear it, it's going to have a nicer sear to it. So if there's any sort of extra moisture, we want to damp that out. So we're going to take just a simple paper towel. We're going to go ahead and just put a little pressure on it. So really what we want to make sure is that the skin side is what we're going to sear. So we want to make sure this is dry. Keep going. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. I just changed my glove really quick. And then we're going to make sure that we are using our salt and pepper, that this is what the only one we're going to use it for. We're going to take a little bit of our salt and go ahead and season it again. Just kind of pushing in our fingers as we go. Enough to coat everywhere. We're going to take our pepper and do the same to that. So you can see it nicely coated. Want to make sure it's seasoned properly. Then we're going to flip it over and do the same to the bottom. We do not have to do anything to the bottom as far as taking a paper towel, because the presentation side is the opposite side. So we want to make sure we do that. So it looks something like this. We're going to put it back on our cutting board, and then we are going to sear the chicken. So we turned our pan on to about medium-high heat. We're going to add just a bit of our oil, just enough to coat the bottom. Set that aside. We want to wait just a minute for this to get warm. So to saute or sear a piece of chicken, you want to make sure the pan is hot, but it should not be smoking. If there is smoke involved, your pan is too hot. But you want to make sure you have a hot pan, just not to the point of smoking. So the way that I tell if it's hot, sometimes you can see that the oil starts to move around a bit more. But really, if you put your hand over it and it's hot, and you can feel the heat coming up and it's pretty hot, it's hot. All right, so what we want to do is we want to take the presentation side, which is the skin side. We want to start with that down in the pan first. Okay? So we're going to go ahead and place this in the pan. You should hear a sizzle, right? What we're going to do is let that go. We want to make sure that the chicken is going to sear properly. We don't want to touch it. We don't want to move it. We don't want to keep playing with it. So we want to make sure that it's on about medium to medium-high heat. It should be actively, the sound should be actively searing. And this can take anywhere from, 3 to 5 minutes, depending on the size of your chicken, depending on how big it is, how thick the skin is. We're going to let that sear. We also have another just plain pan that we're going to put the chicken into to cook in the oven. So you want to make sure that you don't use the same pan that you just used to put the chicken in. We want a fresh, clean pan for that. So we're going to let it going. You'll start to see around the chicken that you're going to have a little bit of caramelization or a little bit of browning. That's good. You want to have that. Again, you see some of the steam. It's not smoking. This is just steam from any sort of residual water that's coming out of the chicken. We're going to go ahead and turn it down just a little bit because we're getting a good sear on it. And the fastest way to kind of tell if it's ready, so that this chicken will continue to stick to a pan if it is not ready. If it at all gives you resistance when you pull it up, it's not ready. So let it keep going. So again, we're not moving it around. We may move the pan just slightly if the oil is not even, just to kind of get the pan a little more even. And again, it's not smoking. The pan is not too hot. It's just hot enough. So we're going to go ahead and just test it again to see where, so just a slight give there. So you want to make sure, it's crucial that your pan is hot. So you cannot sear a piece of chicken in a cold pan, and you cannot sear a piece of chicken in a very, very, very hot pan. It'll just burn it. So you want to make it even temperature and just let it go. So again, you'll see a little bit more caramelization of everything. You're going to hear it start to slowly, the sound will kind of slow down a bit as it's running out of surface area to cook. So once that caramelization happens, the sound will lessen. It won't be kind of that screaming noise that you hear. So we're going to check this again to see if it resists, and it's a little bit easier. So we're going to go ahead, and it's not resisting at all. So we're going to go ahead and take it off, and we're going to place it on our pan to put in the oven. So you should have a nice caramelization. It shouldn't be burnt, but you should see that darker sort of orangey light brown color, but it's pretty evenly seared. So that's what you're looking for. So we're going to go ahead and turn off our pan, and we're going to place this in the oven to cook on 350, anywhere from about 8 to 15 minutes depending on the thickness. But we're going to put it in the oven right now. So we're going to now do the cooking of the sauce saucheur for the hunter's chicken. So this is a very basic French classic sauce recipe. And the reason why it is so important, the French were great at a lot of things, but they're known for their sauces, really developing flavors over time, really just building great technique into it. So it's important to learn how to build and develop flavors in a sauce. And this really translates to any sort of just basic pan sauce. You can change out ingredients here and there, but the sauce is a really important part of the chicken dish. It's going to add a lot of depth and flavor. So we're going to go through how to do that right now. So we're going to use the same pan that we cooked the chicken in, because we want some of the flavors that were in that chicken. And we're going to turn this on to about medium heat. And this is pretty hot still. So we're wanting to sear things in here, saute. So we don't want it to be so hot that it's smoking, but we want it definitely to be a hot pan. So again, the way that we test that, because there's fat in here, we don't ever want to put water in here because it will just splash up and it's dangerous. So we just want to put our hand over. If it feels hot to your hand, it's hot. All right, so we're going to start with our shallots that we minced. We're going to go ahead and just utilize all of the fat that was in here from the cooking of the chicken. And we're going to add a little bit more just because this is going to soak up a lot of stuff. And once we just start to get these, to just start to saute, we're going to go ahead and add our mushrooms now. So the reason we're adding our mushrooms now is mushrooms are full of water. So as you can see, it really just absorbs that oil pretty quickly. And we want to make sure that we get a little bit of this water out of these mushrooms. So we didn't add our garlic yet because we don't want this garlic to burn. So we're going to add just slightly bit more oil here just to get a little bit more fat underneath all of these mushrooms. And we're going to keep stirring this so our shallots do not burn. But we want to keep this on about a medium heat. And we're going to let these sear just slightly, these mushrooms. Get a pretty good color. We want to get them pretty separated out in the pan here. Let that go. We're going to add our minced garlic that we had. All of our garlic. And just spread around. Our pan is still hot. You can hear it. You're going to start smelling more of those shallots. You can smell the aroma from the garlic. That's what we want. We don't want to burn the garlic. The garlic will burn very, very, very easily. I'm going to grab our chicken stock here. All right, so once we get a good colorization on those shallots and a little bit on that garlic, we're gonna add our concassé tomatoes that we had. Again, we wanna make sure that we do not overcook these because we want them to still keep their integrity, but we wanna just start cooking them. From here, we're gonna add a little bit of salt. We wanna bring a little more of that water out of those mushrooms, so we do that kind of by forcing it with a little bit of salt and pepper. And once that pan starts to get a little hot, we're gonna add about a cup of our stock. This is a quart, so we don't wanna add this whole thing, but this is our chicken stock. So we're gonna add just about a cup. You can pre-measure that if you need to. So from here, we wanna make sure that we're gonna scrape the bottom of the pan and get any amount of that pan dripping that's stuck still. We're gonna turn this down to about a simmer. So low to kind of medium heat. We really just wanna start cooking these mushrooms and getting everything going. This chicken stock, because it's a little fortified, it's gonna be thicker. You're gonna start smelling the chicken stock, you're gonna smell the garlic, the shallots, the mushrooms, but really just a really flavorful, delicious sauce that we're building in layers. So we don't just wanna add everything in and kind of boil it out. We wanna do it in layers. So we're gonna let this go. We're gonna reduce it down, which meaning we're evaporating a lot of the water vapors out of it. So you want it to be actively moving, but not a rapid boil. So this is just a good simmer that we have here. So we're gonna let this reduce down to about half, and then we'll come back and finish it. So we're going to make our olive oil mashed potato. So this is a great recipe to use if you're not wanting to use cream in something, heavy cream. So we're using olive oil as our fat in this case. So olive oil is gonna bring a really nutty, delicious flavor to these that's really gonna pair well with our chicken dish. So, you know, this is a really basic way to make mashed potatoes. It's something that everyone loves, mashed potatoes, but it's a really, really, really simple recipe. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. So we have our potatoes that we cooked. So these were, the water was drained out, and we're gonna let them sit just for about 2 to 3 minutes out of that drained water, just to kind of evaporate any extra water that might be in there. So we wanna make sure that there's a little bit dry, but they're still hot. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna add about 2 tablespoons of our softened butter that we have. We're just gonna put it right in. And we're gonna add about a tablespoon at a time of our olive oil. So you wanna use extra virgin olive oil. We're not cooking with this, so it's already cooked. And we're just simply gonna use a whisk. A whisk is the best device to use for this. You really are able to incorporate and smash these mashed potatoes up. So we're gonna just really mash them. They're nice and soft, so it doesn't take that long. We're gonna keep going till about halfway. We're gonna then add our second tablespoon of our olive oil. And you're gonna start to see that they're gonna come together. They're gonna appear to be very creamy. Part of it's the butter, but also that olive oil. Once it starts mixing with the potato and the starch from the potato, it really has a lovely texture to it. So we're gonna keep going. We're just making sure we get some of those bigger lumps out. And then we're gonna add the last third of our olive oil. That way it's nice and incorporated. It's not oily, it's just enough to come together. We're gonna go ahead and hit our whisk on here to get any bits and pieces that maybe didn't get incorporated inside. Go ahead and keep mashing. We don't wanna over mash because then the starches will come out and the potatoes will get slightly gummy. So we're gonna put this to the side. We're gonna then go to our spatula. We're just gonna kind of fold any remaining. We're gonna go ahead and season at the end. So again, we're gonna add a good amount of salt It's about 3 pinches. And we're gonna add white pepper to this. The reason we're adding white pepper is we don't really wanna see the big flakes that black pepper has, but we do wanna season. So this will incorporate and add just enough pepper. So you want everything incorporated together. You're gonna have a little bit of smaller pieces that haven't necessarily been mashed all the way, but that's okay. It's more of a rustic mash than a puree. So we're making an olive oil mash. So from there, we always want to taste. I'm gonna make sure it's seasoned properly. You should taste, the first thing you should taste is the olive oil. You should taste the salt, the pepper, the potato last. The texture is gonna be very, very, very similar to our traditional mashed potato, but that olive oil brings a really nice nutty flavor. So we're gonna go ahead. I'm gonna put this in a separate container because you want them to stay warm. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour them into this container. They're really nice. And set these aside. Our sauce is now reduced down to au sec, which meaning it is a bit thicker. You can see on the pan, it coats the pan nicely. So we are ready to add the final ingredients and then go right to plating. So from there, we are going to add our 2 tablespoons of butter. So for this, we want to make sure we turn off our pans. We want it to be hot, but not on. So we're going to go ahead and add our 2. And the heat of the sauce will just melt this butter. So this is Montaubert. We want to make sure that we're just mounding this with butter. But because butter is a fat, it will separate if it's too hot. So as you can see, it's just slowly melting in here. It's this beautiful, lovely texture. The sauce is shiny. That butter is adding a nice sheen to it. This is going to add a really rich dimension of flavor. And you know, the French are known for their butter and sauces, and this is the reason why. It creates this really lovely texture and color to it. So from there, we're going to make sure that we're going to add all of our herbs last. So the reason we're doing that is we want to keep the integrity of them, but we want to keep the freshness as well. If we could add some in as we were cooking it, but we like to add them at the end. So we're going to take our parsley. We're going to add our parsley. It's going to be nice and vibrant and green. We're going to add about half of the tarragon that we had. Tarragon is a pretty strong flavor, but you want to add just a little bit. From there, we're just going to incorporate this in. Again, this is off, so it's just the heat that was already in the pan. We're going to go ahead and taste this before we season it, just to make sure, because as we're reducing down, we did season the mushrooms when we were cooking it. It's going to, you know, reduce the flavor, which it could be a little salty. So we don't want to add anything unless we taste it first. So we taste it. It needs just a pinch more salt. And we're going to finish it with just a little more pepper. And that is our finished pan sauce, our saussure. So we're going to start plating our chicken. We want to make sure that we pull the chicken out of the oven at 160 because it will carry over to 165. If we pull it out at 165, it's going to be carried over to about 170, 175, and it will be very dry. So it's okay to pull it out at 160, knowing that it will get to 165. But always make sure before you plate it, it is at that 165 temperature, which we're at right now. This pan is hot, so we're going to take this out. We're going to take our chicken. So we're going to cut the chicken. I turned it around just so it's easier to see. But what we're going to do is slice it. We never want to slice down. We want to slice on a bias, so at an angle. We want to make sure that helps to fan it out. So we're going to start at the end. We're just going to simply go at a bias. And you're going to do a little bit thinner pieces to make sure that it's easier to eat, but also it has a nice presentation. So we're going to go all the way until you hit the center. We're going to put that off to the side just for a second. We're then going to take our mash, our olive oil mashed potatoes. I'm going to go ahead and plate our mashed potatoes. So the way that I'm going to plate it for this purpose, again, you're going to make more mashed potato than you're actually going to use because the size of the potato that we used was very large, but you won't need the entire amount of potato on the plate. So we're going to take just about a good chef spoonful I'm going to start at the bottom of the tungsten sign, and I'm going to treat it like this plate is a half moon. So I'm going to go and just simply spread our mash, okay? So just a little bit of an angle, just a rustic mash here. I'm going to then go and take our chicken, and we're going to just simply fan it out, just enough where you can see a little bit of it, but it's still incorporated. Okay. Let's get a quick wipe of my hands. I'm going to take our beautiful pan sauce that we have. And you notice how it's not a lot of liquid. The liquid has reduced down. It's really just about the mushrooms and the herbs. So the tomatoes are still in there. We still have a really great amount of sauce though. So we're going to take this, and I'm simply just going to put it right kind of on the edge, almost like drawing a line, if you will. So it's not covering this beautiful chicken that we have, but just enough where we're getting a good amount of that. And again, we're going to make more sauce than we actually need, so you don't need to put all of it on there. But what I will do is I'm going to take any remaining liquid that we have, because it's so flavorful and delicious. Just going to put just a little bit at the very end. That way, every bite of the chicken, we have a little bit of sauce. So when you're done, you'll have a nice elevated dish. So a couple different ways that you have options to plate the olive oil mashed potato. So in the original one, we did more of a half moon, but that's not the only shape you can do. So if you think of it as a clean palette here, we still have more mash that we can use. So we can do more of a simple, what you would consider just a traditional sort of mash. That, and maybe just give a little divot. Then you could do the chicken across and just keep this in the middle. Or we can do, if you want to keep it a little bit more linear, we could do something that's more in a line, that's a little more towards the top. Again, these are rustic mash, so they're not going to be smooth like a potato puree. They're going to have a little bit more consistency to them. So you can do something a little more artistic, you can do something a little more basic, something that is just very similar in the middle, but there's lots of different options. You just want to make sure there's an appropriate amount of mashed potato per chicken. We don't want the entire plate filled with mashed potatoes, but we also don't want a little tiny bit. So every bite we have, we should get a little bit of the sauce, a little bit of the potato, a little bit of the chicken.